So, as I said, Nietzsche is an interesting figure, and he has generally a pretty different critical take on moral theory, just like he has on just about everything. In On the Genealogy of Morals, right, he tells us right from the start that we remain unknown to ourselves, we seekers of knowledge, and this is because we've never looked at ourselves. Right? If we take a look at what we do when we theorize, right, what we try to do is turn ourselves into an object, right, an object of study. Right? The Socratic dicta, to some extent, made presuppositions about the pre-born original moral nature of a human being. Aristotle thought we had a function. For Kant, we had 1, 2, 3 primary motive forces: reason, the will, and inclination. And in Mill, we are rather simple creatures of appetite and aversion. Right? We like pleasure, we don't like pain, so the goal of life is to get as much pleasure as possible and avoid as much pain as possible. Right? Each and every one of these theorists assumed something about human beings even before they started to theorize, and that's what their moral theories hang on. Right? Now, what Nietzsche wants to do is not take humanity as a finished product, right, as something that's set, as something that right from the beginning of our theory is clear to us. Right? What Nietzsche wants to do is take a look at what sort of a beast human being is. Right? He's not going to assume that we have any primary motive forces. He's going to assume, with the will to power, that we are free and creative beings. Right? Just by looking at cultures, we can see this. We create values. We create values to help us survive. What's valuable to your culture? Right? Then we can figure out what the challenges that your culture, my culture, any culture faces. And we face these challenges by creating values. And these values demand something of us. They demand that we overcome particular obstacles. Right? Freedom, democracy, capitalism, money, gain, material surplus. All of these things are values. And their value, according to Nietzsche, is that we value them. Right? We value them because, at least theoretically, they help us, or used to help us, survive. Right? So that's how Nietzsche sees the basic situation. Now, in terms of moral theory, right, what Nietzsche wants to do is evaluate the origins of our moral prejudices. The origins of our moral prejudices. If we think about how we've, throughout the course, evaluated any moral theory that we've come across, right? We take a look at Socratic moral theory, Aristotelian moral theory, Kantian, Millian, utilitarian, what have you. Right? We take a look at the presuppositions of that moral theory, we take a look at the philosophers and their reasons and support for their conclusions, and then, what do? We take a look at their conclusions and see if that moral theory justifies or excuses the sorts of things we want that moral theory to justify or excuse. A moral theory in which it was okay to kill. No matter what the reasons in support for its conclusions, we would say, that moral theory is not good for us. Right? That's not what we're looking for. That's not what we're shopping for in a moral theory. Right? Because when we look for truth, we look for the truth we want to find. Right? We want it to be wrong to kill. We want it to be wrong to commit adultery. We want it to be wrong to lie, to steal, what have you. Right? And in so doing, Nietzsche would argue that we make assumptions, that we act on prejudices. So what Nietzsche's going to do, rather than create a moral theory that just kind of pats us on the back and tells us what we think is wrong and what we think is right, right? And engages in a sort of apologetics for the sorts of actions that we want to justify, excuse, or forbid. Right? What Nietzsche wants to do is ask a fairly simple set of questions. Where did our concept of good and evil come from? Right? There's a distinction between good and bad, between justifiable and unjustifiable actions. Where'd that come from? Right? Secondly, in looking at these origins of our moral prejudices, is it the action itself, is it the notion itself that is right or wrong, or does that judgment stem from something psychological? Right? And then thirdly, he wants to ask, is this healthy? Right? Does this help us survive, or does it hinder our ability to survive? Right? Does it affirm life, or does it primarily negate? Right? Does it primarily foster a disposition of hatred, of weakness, of what have you, or do our morals, right, do our values foster a love of life, a vitality, a healthy disposition? Right? So these are the standards that Nietzsche is going to be examining. Right? So he's already told us that we remain unknown to ourselves. The measuring stick that Nietzsche is going to be using is us, ourselves, and the idea of a healthy human being.